It's been a long while since the launch of Dawntrail, and I mentioned in the video covering the role quests and deliveries that I had some expectations for the Capstone quests and would wait until both sets were released before covering them and give my thoughts on the stories and how well they execute the finale. For those not familiar with the Capstone quest for Final Fantasy XIV, it's the finale questline for role quests and deliveries when you've already completed all their component storylines. For role quests, this means the story for tank, healer, and ranged physical, magical, and melee DPS. And for the deliveries, it's the individual questlines for the different gathering and crafting jobs. In Dawntrail, the role quests revolve around the activities of a secret, yet not so secret and not very effective, society of villains called the Passage of the Unbound. And much like the role quest did in Endwalker, they have you travel across the world to resolve the situation. As for the deliveries, they were focused on one of Tuliyollow's marketplaces, Wachumeqimeqi, the craftsman's corner more or less. The businesses are failing, their proprietors are hitting a rough patch, or find themselves floundering, and they need someone to help get them back in the green. And while we're on the subject, let's talk deliveries first then. The Wachumeqimeqi Capstone quest is a victory lap. It's the best way to describe it. You have helped the different businesses become successful, help the proprietors take advantage of potential new business opportunities, help them find confidence in themselves, and teach them how to work in partnership with someone else, how people's efforts and abilities can complement themselves. For example, Fisheries Hanuhanu had a problem where the owner really liked rare and strange fish but didn't know how to market them. But a blue mage shows up who needs those unusual catches for an important rite of passage. So you lend a hand in angling these wild creatures, and he provides Hanuhanu with recipes, giving the fisheries owner the means to make his passion profitable. The blacksmith business is struggling because the owner hired a former potsworn goldsmith without understanding what a potsworn is like and expecting someone who's very used to working delicately to suddenly deliver bulk orders in a quick fashion. Here you pick up the slack and help them realize there is a way for their skills to complement one another. One does the basic frame, the other does the detail work. And that is more or less the vibe of the deliveries. In some, you're a critical part of the business. Without you, nothing happens. And in others, you're there more or less to help out a bit. In either case, it's only until they can stand on their own feet. If you'd like a deeper dive into the different stories and what I thought about them, go check out the previous video. The link is in the description, and you should be seeing a nice little note right up there in the corner as well. So, back to the Capstone. It is, as I said, a victory lap. Ropley, the head of Wachumeqimeqi, wants to do a big sale event, like a bazaar, but not just to celebrate how the different businesses turn things around. His goal also connects with the MSQ in a great way. He says, hey, Tural's been through some stuff recently, and we need something to lift the spirits. So why not have this big event to celebrate the different cultures of Tural? After all, Tuliyollo is a giant melting pot of different peoples. Not only that, but there's people in the dome we thought were lost and now can come back and visit, and also a completely new culture and products and merchants that we will be overjoyed to engage with, to learn from. So he sent our good Pink Ranger Pelu Pelu Mablu out to talk to every merchant out there in the nation to come over and display their wares, to join this big celebration and possibly make some great connections and deals. But there's still one piece missing: the people in the dome, and Roleplay is happy to tell you he doesn't know enough about them, but we do. And so it's our job to go over there and help get the word out and get some people interested in doing some business and having a little fun. And what do you know? You don't need to do it alone. All those business proprietors you've helped in the deliveries are going with you. And so you have fun scenes of getting some merchants, crafters, and gatherers interested in doing some business and helping out with the big event. There's even a great scene of a Shatona woman putting the moves on the Eorzean bunny boy working at the apothecary and failing miserably, her advances just going way over his head. It all results in this really beautiful event that once again showcases all those businesses you help bring around and helps in creating stronger ties between the Alexandrians and Tuliyollans. And allowing friends and families to reconnect. And so for me, the Capstone quest was really good. I would have liked a bit of crafting and gathering here and there. Maybe, help the businesses in the collection or creation of a brand new product just for the event. But even without that, the story itself was quite fun. And I wish I could say the same for the role quests. In my previous video, I expressed my disappointment in some of the storylines for the role quests. Some of them felt a bit shallow, and some didn't make too much sense to me. There's also this overall feeling of incompetence about these villains. But I had hope, I had a theory, that the enemies we'd fought, the members of the Passage of the Unbound that we defeated, were meant to be defeated. They were meant to be hunted down and taken out, for two reasons that I thought would make for an interesting story and or allow for the introduction of a new faction. First reason is that they were more or less test runs, for the artifacts, for the idols that use the powers of the Tural Vidral. Give them to people who are bound to abuse them and see what happens. And there were some elements of the story that would support this theory of mine. After all, in the healer questline, the villain's experimentation with the artifact allowed her to create new poisons that were not tied to any living creature, meaning that the power of the relics, while based on the abilities of the withdrawal, are not limited by that, or perhaps that the relics themselves are capable of evolution. The second reason was that while these idiots were bumbling around drawing attention to themselves, the real powers would be using the distraction to carry out their real plans. And of course, this would also be about understanding how capable the Warrior of Light is, and how formidable the Turali and Eorzean forces were, not to mention how resilient or hard to topple the different nations might be. After all, the Passage of the Unbound does espouse an anarchist philosophy, their ultimate goal to topple nations. But all of that would hinge on Apiahi, the leader of the passage, and how good her story was, how well written her motivations were, and ultimately what the end game of the organization could be. And that's where the ball's been dropped. The Capstone quest begins with news that the passage is still active and looking for new members, so the plan is for us to join them, to get close to Apiahi and determine what the plan is. And while this could have been an interesting story, with our character forced to do some mildly shady stuff, undercover cop kind of thing, the problem is that it's basically a Hildebrand case, but without the framework that makes Hildebrand pull things off. The role quests, while having something of a comedic start, with all the villains gathered around Shibalaftier and talking loudly about their schemes, are generally serious stories. The villains have selfish goals, and though their motivations or some story elements don't make all that much sense, there is a consistent tone. There's some humor, of course, but it's a drama, not a comedy. The Capstone quest is the opposite. It's entirely comedic, with moments of seriousness, and the whole thing just falls flat, with the passage very much Team Rocket. Your infiltration into the passage depends on a group of judges who are, well, idiots. And their tests are dumb, and then they send you to meet Apiahi. You find her apparently taming a sandworm, but then when you speak to her, the first thing she does is strike a JoJo pose. You follow her around a bit and she reveals the origins of her grudge with law, order, and government, and that bit is actually compelling and made me hopeful for about 5 minutes. She was born in a caste-based society where your role is determined at birth and there is no way out of it. She decided to do something about it. Went out and hunted a creature that even their best hunters couldn't. But for breaking taboo, basically, she was exiled, leaving her with a deep resentment for the laws and rules that bind and oppress people. And later on, she speaks of her travels and witnessing how the monetarists in Ul'dah used wealth to oppress, and how in Ishgard the church kept people trapped in an endless war. She talks a good game, and to sum things up, her plan is to topple Tuliyollal, to return it to the place she first visited, when it wasn't a nation yet, which makes me think was during the time of Gulul Jaja's adventures. She believes this will make the free land she once saw, where laws don't exist anymore. Problem is that while the solo duty is pretty fun and has some nice enemies, and you fight side by side with the NPCs that join you in the quest lines, ultimately her allies are incompetent, they can barely remember what the plan is, and the writers manage to derail her character at the end. For you see, despite her travels and the examples of oppression she witnessed and her own story, what truly set her off was that she was kicked out of an inn for refusing to pay. And then when she just propped up a tent somewhere and told her no loitering, so of course it almost burned. Really? You give me a good spiel on a compelling motivation and then turn it into an immature temper tantrum? Worse still is that when the final fight starts, she's not surprised to find out we're not her ally, because she saw right through us. She knew we was the champion of Eorzea, but played it cool, hoping her story would somehow change our mind. It makes her seem insightful and intelligent. So the whole temp thing comes out of left field, and when the other characters tell her that with her abilities she could do much more, do a lot of good, her dialogue makes her seem like an airhead. Same with her views on her allies, the villains from the other quest lines, admiring them for their dedication to personal freedom, which isn't really what they're about, and it clashes with something she says in a prior scene where she admits that they had flaws and were not really about the nation toppling, but did admire the way they committed to their own ideals and goals, which is not the same thing as pronouncing them champions of personal freedom. The first scene again makes her insightful, capable of realizing her choice of allies was lacking. The latter scene makes her an idiot. And guess what? Remember what I said about her talking about her travels and the oppression she saw? It happens in this scene. So she ends up being this really inconsistent character, and it seems like it's all in the name of pulling a funny. And then there's the ending of the questline, which sees a group of people do the exact same thing as the original members of the Unbound did at the start. Speak of their plans out loud at the taco place, only this time the staff quickly calls on the Lance Guard, and the last shot is of these people running around the beach, comically pursued by the guards. There is so much potential wasted in this storyline that I'm left utterly disappointed. And the seeds are there for a great commentary on stifling rules, oppressive traditions, personal freedom, and desires. And I can't help but draw comparisons to the role quests of Endwalker and Shadowbringers and just how much better they were across the board. Characterization, tone, delivery, just superior in every way. And honestly, I don't like making such comparisons. Each expansion has its own context, which helps carry such storylines. Endwalker has a crisis, and the role quests explore that crisis across the world. Shadowbringers makes the Warriors of Darkness tragic heroes, doomed to be seen as villains, and the role quests tell you their tales, how their tragedy unfolded. But even with that frame of mind, the role quests in Dawntrail are too separate from the main story. As I said in the other video, I appreciate that thematically it's an inversion of the expansion. Instead of us coming to a new land, it's about the Warriors of Tural traveling across the world, where they are the strangers in a strange land, with our support. But that's where any connection ends. In Dawntrail's context of, this is a new beginning, the start of a new journey, I would have liked the role quests to be about creating something new, which is why I had hopes that the Passage of the Unbound would prove to be a new organization that we could contend with in the future, and not this bunch of nincompoops more concerned with striking a pose than being a threat in any way. But I don't want to end this video on a dour note. So if you haven't, or if you've just done part of it, I heartily recommend you go and do the Wachumeqimeqi Deliveries. You'll help out some nice businesses, some cool people, level up your hand and land jobs, and get a nice uplifting tale in the process. If you ask me, that's a killer deal.